Hello, listeners. Welcome, Rompereglas. I am sitting here with the Brittany R Williams. She's your conduit for all things transformation and embodiment. She's committed to bringing women along the journey of healing trauma and living in tranquility. As a transformational embodiment coach, she helps take ambitious women from hiding their potential to allowing themselves to be seen and heard from their true essence. She uses healing modalities, mindset, and strategy to support the journey of expansive transformation. As a trauma informed sex doula, her focus is not on sex as you know it. Her focus is really on the energy and spirit of sex, sexuality, and sexual experiencing. She believes that people can transform their human experience as they heal the deepest desires and restore connection with their bodies, create safety in your vulnerability, and reclaim trust and intuition. So, welcome, the Brittany Williams.
Yes,
Welcome
thank
to
you. So glad
yeah,
to be here.
yeah. So this is fascinating work. I want to know you what you conceptualize as a sex doula. How do you experience that in yourself?
Inside of me, like the sex doula, it just came out one day. I didn't even have words to wrap around what I did. Partly because all of the spaces that I went in, they all the spaces I went in were embodiment, it was sexuality, and then anytime I was in a space with where black and or brown women were being served, women of color being served, it was extremely over sexualized. And I was just like, I mean, I wish that this was the norm, but I was like, the reality that was happening inside of me and what I was seeing from in my community, in my tribes, in my circles was this idealistic view of sexuality with no safety to sustain it or even reach it and attain it. And so that's what brought my attention to the energy and spirit of sex. And that's what got me to the place where I realized like I'm an energy worker, I'm a light worker. But when we find our healing in the lower places, in those lower places of ourselves, the root, the generation, the ancestral, the stuff in us that comes up regardless if we wanted it or not, the those deep places in us, when we find alignment and security and safety and healing in those places, the heart and the mind came into alignment. And so I realized in myself that I was this energy worker and I was doing this work of the root, aligning hearts and minds. People were expanding and they were feeling big and feeling seen. And I realized the only thing that could describe what I was doing was doula work because I was holding the space, holding the person in the part to where they could not hold themselves, where it felt hard until they felt strong again. And so I was just I was just being their support in a place where they had not seen support in a long, long time.
Yeah. And can you share a little bit about your process of coming into this work? Because usually when I interview people, I know that there's a big story, and so I'm always interested in the story and in the process.
I think I think this was a work that was probably being formed since the day I was born, honestly. Um, for myself, I was a survivor of childhood sexual trauma. And I knew when I looked back at myself and observed with tender love and empathy at that little child who went through that and how she tried to protect herself. And the fear that came up, and the times where I stopped, the times that I hid, the times that I did not say the thing that I knew I wanted to say, the times that I didn't take the chances that I knew I wanted to take, but it just wasn't, it didn't feel like it was made for me. And I remembered all those times. And I went to a place where I wanted to deal with my anxiety. I wanted to deal with all these things. And I remember going to therapy, and that happened. It worked. I went through EMDR, I went through high trauma therapy to turn the noise off and reach that place of neutrality. And about 3 years after all that, my abuser met me at my 97-year-old's grandmother's funeral and asked me, "Do you remember me?" And I remember talking to my therapist and doing the work around that to turn that noise off and get back to neutrality. And I'm talking, and I call it naked neutrality because neutrality and that nothingness was not comfortable for me. It
Right.
was work to get there. And then when I got there, I was just like, I don't know how people live like this without anxiety. I don't know how people live with this lightness. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so, but I remember getting back to that place after that incident, after that encounter, and I told her, I told my Julie, that's what me and my friends call her. We call her Aunt Julie. So I told Aunt Julie that I was like, you can't do this part with me. And so she wasn't surprised that I said that. She was just like, I know, like, you are deeply connected and that you know exactly what you mean. And so she asked me to explain a little bit. I said, you can turn the noise off, but in order for me to own it again, in order for my sexuality, for my peace, for my experience to be mine again, there's a different work that needs to be done. And I wasn't quite sure what it looked like. And I went on a journey. I became a solo traveler. I started to go and find myself in places and connected to people who were teaching me things and showing me things I had never seen before, that I never experienced before. I remember my first time encountering a yoni egg. I just held it in my hand for like 6 months and kept it in my pocket. And all these things, and all these things really forming these deep connections with these elements. And I paid such close attention to how my body felt as I moved through this. And I recorded a lot of it. And then I realized that I wasn't the only one. Because if I gave even a glimpse of what I was doing to somebody else, they would stop in the grocery line and just be like, I have 3 kids. I don't know if I've ever had an orgasm. You know, they're just like, I own a business and I would actually sell my business for a hug. And I was just realized like I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only person who have done all the things that we're supposed to do and have the things that we're supposed to have and lead the lives that everybody told us was great. But there was this shadow, there was this lingering part that just didn't feel like mine. And people called it pleasure, they called it things, but it was something that I remember I couldn't identify with. It wasn't a natural part of me. And then I realized on this journey that it wasn't a natural part of the lives of anybody that looked like me or with my last name.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they tapped into that and owned it, it was felt dangerous. And so that's what got me to this place now where no matter how far on my edge I feel like I'm living right now, when I'm holding naked spaces, when I'm, telling people, shouting shame on the rooftop as a root solution to a problem, when I'm doing that part, as much as it makes me feel like I'm on my edge, it's worth it if one woman walks out and she feels like she is herself again, that she is back connected, that she is whole again, and that she's moving through the world that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. And when you say, I wrote a note to myself here, like the pleasure felt dangerous. Can you say more about that? Because
Mm.
that's so nuanced. There's so much in there.
Yeah. And I think when that pleasure feeling dangerous, I just remember growing up and watching the women around me. And it wasn't everybody, but it was a large majority. They were like the hardest working women that you'll ever lay your eyes on. They worked hard, they took care of everything. And I constantly heard that phrase that I'm happy when everybody else is happy.
Mm.
And they connect their pleasure to everything else around them. And remember I was just like, well, there's something better than that. Like there was a higher level that I could actually own and experience, and it was just mine. And I remember that feeling wrong or selfish or like I'm a lush. I started to like feel that in myself when I decided like I want to lean into this, but I kept leaning. I never stopped. I continued to lean, and over time, it just really unfolded. And I started to sit with, people not just in my family, but older women who were older than me that had experienced more than me, that they were like reaching 80, 90, and listening to their stories and realizing that when it like we're all connected in a way, and there's always been a storyline. It's if you are walking around in a woman body, that your sexuality and your sexual experience belonged to somebody else, that it was something that was performative on a stage, or it was a service. And so anytime you take something that belongs to somebody else, what is that? That's stealing, right?
Yeah.
So even though you are the one walking around with this body, you thought, and this feeling and this soul and this spirit, it's been put on a stage to serve the
Yeah.
people around you. And so when you go to take it back, even if we call it pleasure right now, if we go and say we're taking it back and we want it to serve our highest good, that feels dangerous. It almost feels criminal. As a Black woman, like I always tell people, it's just like don't get mad at yourself if still in that cycle of hustle and burnout, because that's something that you have to learn to get yourself out of. Black girl, like just be able to take a breath and honor yourself that you're still standing here right now. Because if there are people who looked like you 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, if they were doing what you were doing right now, they probably would have lost their foot or lost
Absolutely.
their lives.
That's
And
right.
so that's that feeling that we have that we're doing something wrong, even when we feel good, that we're doing something wrong, even if it's something that we truly desire. That's that part where it feels dangerous, and that's that generational inherited part that's deeply rooted inside of us.
That's right. That's right. And so what's coming up for me as you were talking is like getting pleasure from the giving, right? Which has us in sort of this pattern of never receiving. So it's always being like pushed away from us because it's over there, it's over there, it's over there. The energy is always flowing out and not in.
Right.
And you are giving women, Black women especially, permission to to say no. Like, I'm going to gather all of that energy that I put out into the world, I'm going to start directing it towards myself. And that feels dangerous, right? Because it's breaking up a like generations and generations of patterns of serving, serving, serving.
Yeah. Yes.
And your work is, you do a lot of work around shame. And
Yes.
so there's a, you grew up in the church, is that right?
Yes, I did. I did grow up in a Southern Baptist church.
Which I've never been to a Southern Baptist church, but I've heard it has its own flavor, its own unique flavor. Um, but yeah, so there's, right, pieces of how does the your experience of growing up in the church, if that has any relevance at all, plus the generational piece, pleasure and shame, how does that all come together for you?
I think with my background in Christianity and in the church, I think that was something that like I have to admit, I grew up in the church. I've always had a connection with God. The church has not always loved me. I was considered the rebel, the one that they didn't want in the group, the one that hair didn't look right enough. I was too tall. I was too masculine. I was too this. I was too that. And so there was always a reason to not have me in whatever group. There was always a reason for me to get kicked out of something. Uh, and to this day, I appreciate them so much for that, because all the things that I used to get kicked out for are all the things that people actually want in their lives and pay for now. So, but the important part that I am, because I do believe that you can learn anything anywhere from anybody, as long as you know to take what you need and leave the rest. And so, and that's what my relationship has always been. And what I needed was that God connection. And I've had it for a long, long time. I've had that connection of knowing that I was covered, that I was protected when there wasn't a protector around, was prosperous when I didn't see food. I've always had that knowing of purpose, that knowing of what's now. Because I think we get caught up in what's next, and we think that, oh, there's nobody there for us, there's no support. But what's now, being completely sure and being completely present in that has been such a gift. And I think that that is something that I was able to take from some of those religious spaces, and and I took that part and I left the rest to them. They kicked me out anyway. so, and so but like I got to keep my connection because there's no building or no man that could give me what I received. So
Oh, I love that. I was getting chills as you were talking, just your description of being covered and being not here now versus what's next, like trusting what's here now and trusting the unfolding process of that. I think that's so important. We get caught up in the next and sort of caught up in anxiety about the future when we're having a hard time. And I love how you describe that, just the protection and the trust. I think that that is like, right, you having the experience of building that trust in yourself, trust in spirit, faith, whatever you want to call it. How does that connect to the work? Because you talk about the the spirit and energetics of sex and sexuality.
mhm. I think when it comes to trust, the thing that probably stands out the most to me, I remember saying this prayer, and I have to tell you, the when I was saying this prayer, I think I had just had a baby. I was weighed about 315 pounds. I thought, like everybody thought, that I was going to have a stroke at any second because I had stroke level blood pressure issues after that child. Um, and for some reason, I had said this prayer after and feeling like I was at the lowest, worst point. I said a prayer and I said, God, I want to see me the way that you see me. And it was like unlocking a door. And that door, it had no floor when I walked in. It was just the ceiling. And I had to go through and elevate and elevate and elevate and break through all those pieces till I got to the place where so that's where the Brittany Williams came from. And I always say, I was just like, it's a lowercase the because I'm humble. But that's where that came from, because I realized that getting to that place where I can see myself from that point of view, where I can see myself in that bigness, in that majesty. I can see myself in that place where, you know, where I used to feel like I was too much when like, from my point of view, I felt too much. And in the world that I was in, I felt like I was too much. And then from that point of view, I realized that everything around me, like, it, I couldn't be too much. I could not be too much for this entire universe. That was impossible. And so
Yeah.
I was able to bury that and move. And it did something, being able to trust in that, being able to develop trust in that way. Part of that was letting some of those things, some of those constructs and stories die. So I can say every ceiling that I broke through, it was a different story, a different condition, a different thing that was attached to me, whatever was tethering me before to a perception of myself. It Those chains broke as I elevated, and I was able to get to a place where I can see myself in action, doing what I desired, feeling like, not feeling like too much, and knowing that wherever I am right now is purposeful. I deserve to be there. I'm worthy to occupy the space that I'm in. Though that was the point of view that I started to have. And that is trust became easier and easier and easier as I sat in that and let that be my truth. Trust became easier. And so when it comes to the work in, like, the shadow work of shame and sexuality and all those pieces, being able to not attach to a result and just know you can really indulge and enjoy the process even if it's hard, and trust that what you're doing is purposeful, you're worthy of it, and the goodness comes from that. It really does. And so, and I think that being growing up with that Christian background and that church background, having to believe in something that you've never seen before, it's like you start to bring that in and turn that in on yourself as well. So you start to see yourself as you've never been before, but what you truly desire, and trust that you can get there. And so that's why I love the work of transformation, because I was like, it's a huge fantasy leap to get there. So
Yeah.
I have to say, when I said that prayer, I want to see you how, like, I want to see myself the way that you see me, at 100, at 315 pounds, feeling like I was going to die at any second from the blood pressure issues and some of the other health issues and the things that I was going through at the time, not even thinking about a business, not even on my radar. I remember I started to fantasize more. And I started to fantasize about myself. And I was just like, I'm going to be on a billboard one day. Like, they're just going to, I'm going to be on a commercial. Like, I just started to write down ridiculous amounts of money. I was like, I'm never going to have to apply for another job. People are just going to find me, and I'm gonna have easier jobs to get paid more money, and I'm not applying for another job. People are just gonna find me, and if it works, so they create the spot for me, I'm gonna take it. And I'm telling you, not 24 months later, my mom calls me while I'm sleeping. I just saw you on a commercial. My sister, I passed by your billboard the other day. Somebody on LinkedIn is in my inbox saying, "Hey, we have a position here. I think that you're a great fit for it." Just from looking at, I created my 6-figure resume and just put it out in the world, and I wanted somebody to find it. And like, I did those pieces, and just in that, the times where I was fantasizing and knowing that it was okay for me to do that, because I had created a lot of safety. I could trust myself. I could trust myself to know that even if I don't see it right now, like, I am creating it. And that's what I want other women, and my heart goes out to women of color, that I want them to grasp onto that, because I know that there's so many places where we're told that that's not available to us. There's way more places that we're told that it's not available, or it's for somebody else, or that, you know, that it's what white people do. There's so many places that say that. And I just decided that I was going to say yes to spirit, and I was going to be a demonstration. If it was only a demonstration to myself, I was going to be a demonstration. And thankfully, I've been able to share it with the world.
That's amazing. I'm just kind of like leaning back in my seat and I'm just like, wow, damn. I love how like just like preposterous, right? Like the kind of like the audacious dreaming, the like moving towards desires that seem like so out of the reality for, your body, your culture. And I come from colonial culture, which is like it has its own version of this, of like the ceiling, feeling where the ceiling is and feeling that on a cellular level, and like the safety and trust of that being the foundation from which you could, yeah, be audacious with your dreaming and your asking and your pulling in of those things that you want. That's
Yes.
amazing. And so from that place, how did you then begin to form like this, being an entrepreneur is a whole other journey, right? So you just described this whole journey, and so now there's this other piece that emerges from it.
Yes. The entrepreneurship, uh, my business, being a coach, stepping in and saying yes. I realized that I was probably doing this for free anyway. That's how it is most of the time. When you're doing something you love, you would do it for free. And I was always that person. It didn't matter like what state I was in. I would find a way, or I would have an idea, and I would, I had a friend that told me the other day. She was like, you've been like talking about sexuality since we were like 17. Like, you had us, like, we were like 17-year-olds, and you had us doing Kegels and squats in the bathroom. So, and I was like, I just never realized that. She was like, yes, it's like, it's been a long time that you've been doing this. But I think that being able to step on that edge and let myself be seen is the part. of the journey. So my business has initiated me probably as much as my the rest of my journey has, but it was just in a different way, because it's one thing to do your work and it's one thing to heal thyself. It's a totally different thing to do your work, heal thyself, and let somebody else know that you did it.
Yeah,
And so
the other piece about putting it out there.
yes, and that's what I did, and I did it one layer at a time. I really honestly started doing it with because I am like I said, always talked about being a very masculine person, but I'm also like one of the most feminine people. Like you wouldn't even be able to sit in a room with me. Uh, it's like that energy is so big, but I realized that I just had my king and my queen both sat on that throne, and so my business gave me a chance to honor my king in a different way, where I came out of this striving, hustle based living and realized that I can create a person who always thought of themselves as not creative. I can actually create. I can create wellness, I can create wholeness, I can create love, I can create security right from my own body. And that's what my business is. And whatever you see is very intuitive. It was created, it was tried, tested, and true, and it just gets shared with the world from that place. And so I do it. I said I started this. I did it a layer at a time as I was going through my initiation. And like I think one of the things that you've experienced was Naked Edition came out of that.
Yes.
And that was my first part of like taking something really practical, like a picture,
Yeah.
or to learning to take pictures, and also helping people integrate confidence and integrate that using their sexuality for themselves and being able to have this receptive form, tapping into their feminine, slowing down and letting themselves create something magnificent that can muse them. And then I stepped into doing one-on-one work, which it just that blew me away because of course I don't know if people know, like when you're one-on-one with somebody, you're in a relationship. And so
That's right.
and so that challenges all of your things, and but I let myself be initiated by that and know that I can, be able to use that intuition and that creative energy that was unlocked and ready, to serve the collective in this way. And so everything that I'm doing right now, even with the Shane project, is it's just that. And I love, love, love taking really simple or practical elements and using them in very expansive ways. And, showing people that you can use play and be productive. You can use pleasure and still be able to show up in true power. You can, take simple elements that you wouldn't otherwise think about and apply them and use them to integrate, giving yourself something tangible to satisfy your physical touch and your physical need, giving yourself something visual to satisfy that, while you also are tapping into those more abstract pieces of mindset and spirituality and that soulful work, and connecting the pieces that way so that you can see yourself in that true essence, like where you really have always been leaning towards anyway, and I'll just pull it out of you.
Yeah. Right. Capturing the divine in a photograph.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And you also studied Reiki, is that right?
Yes. And so that's always been a part. That was a big part of my journey, and I had a real connection with it. It's funny because my Reiki masters actually found me, and so they kind of just we ran into each other, and it's so funny because I love that my Reiki masters found me, and I have two different lineages. One is I've studied with a black woman, and the other person is she identifies as disabled and queer and non-binary, and so she is the one who taught me this community aspect of Reiki, and in the area that she's in and working with the practitioners that she's worked with, they actually hold community Reiki and community acupuncture sessions where people can come for donation or like $5, and get that type of wellness treatment. And I remember when we first talked, we talked about breaking down that wall of privilege and breaking down that wall of bourgeois and
Yeah.
saying and making wellness accessible for people. And so that's an important part of my journey, is knowing that yes, I am worthy of getting paid for my work, but I also, accessibility is so important to me, to make sure that no one gets left out, that if you want it, it's yours. Um,
Amazing.
and so our whole community, Reiki and emotional release for people of color, where people can come and unpack and get that goodness that they see other people talking about, or that they might be curious about, where they can experience it for themselves and see if it's something that they want to keep around. And so that's that's what Reiki has done for me, is let me explore wellness in a more expansive way, where it's just not a linear thing. It's universal, it's big, it's circular, it's cyclical, and being able to just embrace the flow of that. That's what Reiki has done for me. That's what it has done for my clients, and it's just been a beautiful experience.
Amazing. Amazing. I love it. So, so Brittany, tell me about the Shame Project. Give me
The
the
sh-
details about the Shame Project.
yes, the
Tell me about
shame.
like shame. Tell me about shame, why you're so passionate about working with shame and the Shame Project.
Uh, the shame. I'm gonna say shame. The most interesting thing that I feel about shame is that it's hard to define, because I think that there's so many people. We have such diverse experiences in our human experience, and we call it something different.
Yeah.
But I'm here. I call it shame because I'm calling out the root. So I'm not gonna call it insecurity or lack of confidence. I'm gonna just call it shame, because I'm just calling out the root. Just like we have gotten really comfortable with fear,
Yeah.
and yet shame still is not so sexy. So and so that is a part of the shame project, is being able to find your definition of shame. How has shame been experienced in your lineage?
So the
And
so the transmission of shame, you're saying, is different for each person.
yes, and they just have a different experience and a different relationship with shame, because
Gotcha.
everybody's response is not the same. And so I've created a container, a place, a space that would allow people in a group setting, while being supported and surrounded and knowing that they're not alone, to be able to experience, have their own personal experience, and share and unpack and unravel the conditions of shame as it exists for them. And the Shame Project is a 5-week project, and I really like I've picked around with that. It could have been a day, it could have been a month, it could have been a year, but I decided to make this an energetic intensive. And I know people are just like, "What's an energetic intensive?" I'm really known for making up stuff, so but the reality is, I was just like, we've all done it, energetic intensive. I went to a college for 4 years and studied molecular biology. That was my energetic intensive around molecular biology. I've been in courses about cells to learn how to do that better. That was energetic intensive around cells. Like, you've done an energetic intensive before. You did it look different for you. You called it
Right.
something else. Um, and so that's what this space is, that we are here only to deal with the root. And we're here to deal with the root of a chronic, generational, toxic issue. And the only reason why it's toxic is because it knows how to hide so well.
Hmm.
And it also has taught you to point the finger somewhere else. And so
Yes.
I am all about bringing that stuff back in. Let's take responsibility for the things that we can do something about, and let's work from there, and be able to start digging up that root, start loosening and cutting those cords, doing the work around it. And so the parts in the Shame Project that we touch on, that I felt kind of it covered, I mean, it's not everything, but it covers a lot, is family, organizational, and society shame. It's the first week.
Mm.
Then we go into money shame, sexual shame. We have a break, because of course you got to pause when you're dealing with your money and your sex. uh, and one of the things I realize is that they're not that much different. Like you
Right.
usually, you usually, if you heal one, you the other one, you're gonna start seeing some fruits from that labor. Uh, but and then after that integration, we go into success shame, and I think that when we deal with those elements of society, money, sexuality, dealing with those pieces, loosening the conditions and loosening the that tight cord that shame has wrapped around some of those issues,
Yeah.
success shame actually becomes really easy to deal with because you've gotten really intimate with shame and you know what it's going to look like for you. You
Hmm.
know, sometimes your I said the fruit of that loom of shame is contraction. Sometimes it's you just hiding. Sometimes it's just you disappearing. Sometimes it's you shutting up. Sometimes it's you taking second place because you think that first place was created for somebody else besides you or not for people like you. That when it comes to success shame, I think that once we untie the cords from all those other places, success shame is going to be something that we're going to be so loose and free from some. It's just going to unleash itself and we'll be able to kind of move on. And so I'm really excited about seeing women step into this work, being able to have that focused attention, have somebody like, I told people yesterday, I was like, I know I've been talking about shame for a month. I know you might be triggered, but you deserved it. Like, you deserve to be pursued because I'm asking you to do the most vulnerable thing that anybody has probably asked you in a long time. So I shared my own stories. I pursued you. I didn't hold anything back, and I use the language that you're going to hear me say. There is no surprises. How I showed up here, this is how it's going to be in that container, in that
Hmm.
space, and that's what I wanted to even have the time leading up to the Shame Project be an experience, be
Yes.
an experience in normalizing not only vulnerability, but normalizing that receptivity, normalizing letting ourselves be seen, even if we're in a room by ourselves, letting ourselves be seen, normalizing looking inward and being able to admit and say, hey, this might not be serving me anymore. And being able to do it from a place of like heartfelt gratitude.
Yeah.
Because I know whenever me and shame reevaluated our relationship, me and fear reevaluated our relationship with each other. It came from heartfelt gratitude, and I was able to stop the antagonizing effects of fear. And so that's the type of work that I want to do with shame. I want shame to stop antagonizing women. I want shame to, if you're going if you're going to be a part of this human experience, I want these women who go through the shame project to be the demonstration of all the possibilities. I don't all the possibilities when shame is not a part of it, to be a demonstration of what life can look like when you're living your shameless existence. And so that's what my intention for that program is.
And you're such an amazing model for that because the way I experience you show up is just so unapologetic. Like you just show up in your, as you say, in your king and in your queen, and you just take up the space, and you're like, yeah, and it just feels so good. I, it's the way you show up as an energetic transmission of your results,
Yes.
and it's beautiful. Yeah, with shame, it's like, I love that you're talking so much about it because people need to hear it. And also, like, what I've found in my own work is that, like, shame is not like, it's more than a feeling. It's like an whole body experience. It is
Yes.
like when I've felt shame, it's felt like I want to curl up in bed and like stay there for 3 days. Like it's
Yes.
just, you know,
Yeah.
very powerful, like wash. It feels like a whole wash.
Yeah. And so you can imagine how shame has gotten really evolved at hiding. Because if we
Yes.
all experience in a full body experience like that, but there's always a name for it. Like
Yeah.
if I shiver when I talk, there's a name for it, and it's not shame. It's something else. So I must not be dealing with shame. You
Right.
know,
No.
if my stomach swirls every time I stand in front of a crowd, or or if I have to ask for more money, or if I have to be seen in some way, and I feel that contraction in my gut, oh, there's a name for that. Like, it could be anxiety, it can't be shame. And so that's the part where I said shame has evolved in a way where it never has to be dealt with. And that's what I'm
Mhm.
calling out.
Yes.
I'm calling it out and shining the light.
Yeah, and speaking of light, the shame often says you're bad, right? That's sort of the narrative of shame. But what I find too is that, when you talk about shame around success, when we shine, we experience shame as well. So it can be like we can be experiencing and radiating our greatest gifts, and shame can come up in those spaces as well, in those experiences as
Yes.
well.
As I say, it gets to a point, especially when you're dealing with really ambitious women, the floor
Yeah.
is not the problem. It's the ceiling.
Yes.
It's the ceiling. Because I'm like rock bottom, you'll probably never even notice if they were there.
Right.
Their bottom is not that far. And
Right.
so
It's not that threatening.
yeah, I was just like, and you'll never know if they hit the bottom because they've gotten so great. Because shame has taught them to hide so well that they're always okay. It's always fine, fine. Um, but the real issue is the ceiling. And it dawned on me when I was having a conversation with somebody. Like I told you, I'll talk about this in a grocery store, and I think I was just talking about like women of color just kind of being able to own pleasure and be able to experience it in a in an elevated way. And I think, and I was talking about doing womb work and all this, and I remember a woman, she said, I don't know if I want to feel that good. And she was just like, I don't know what I would do with it. And I was like, that's a real thing. I was just
Yeah.
like, I mean, I was like, I'm not tossing any shame around for that because that is reality.
Yeah.
When I dealt with my anxiety in that deep way and I didn't feel anxiety anymore, I felt like I was just gonna float away, like, and I didn't feel anchored. And so that's the part, like, things can get too good. I remember getting to, like, a money mark that I wanted to make, and I remember, like, feeling nervous letting anybody know, like, telling my mom or anything, because it wasn't what people think about me or what it just did not feel like something, like, it had to become normalized inside of me before I was able to really embody it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, the idea, it's just something, especially when you in marginalized backgrounds and marginalized identities, that type of support, support is usually shamed as not being strong. Like, because you needed something else,
Right.
you were not strong. And like and really support is so sexy. Like
Yeah.
the idea that you can have somebody come and take care of you or take care of it or take care of them, and you get to sit for a minute, is actually really, really sexy. But we're not celebrating that in a
Mm.
lot of marginalized communities. We're not celebrating that. We're celebrating working till we have tears in our eyes.
Pushing through.
Yeah. And we're celebrating, biting down and staying in that relationship until you crumble under it. We celebrate that. We're not
Yeah.
celebrating the one who decided to walk away and she's more expansive now than ever.
Exactly.
And that's the parts are just like
It's
we
true.
normalizing success. Like, I was just like, yeah, I'm doing shame work, but we're normalizing the parts that the world said no to,
Hmm.
a long time ago.
Yeah, I really feel like the bigger picture in your work, right? Shame feels so at like the center core of so many of our issues, so many of the ways that we hold ourselves back. And then when you open that up, you really open up the space for us all to get expansive and to take up more space and to, right, live into what we desire, what's possible, open up to what's possible.
Mm.
Yeah. So how can people find you, Brittany?
You can always find me on Instagram at _Brittany R Williams. You'll also be able to find me on Facebook as Brittany Williams. But I will make sure that I'll share the link, because I'm gonna have a free portal that's gonna have practices, there meditation, any workshops that I can give and put in that portal. It'll be dropped every month. And I really invite users to sign up for that portal. It's called the Isness Portal. Because it was a joke. I was just like, once you remove the bullshit out of life and business, all you have is isness. It's just you. And, and so I created the Isness Portal that's actually going to be live and launched in a couple of weeks. And I encourage people to sign up because it's going to be free. It's going to be juicy. It's going to stuff is going to show up there every month, and you don't want to miss that.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Brittany, for being here, for sharing your story and your magic and your medicine. Thank you so much for the work that you do in the world.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.